I want to welcome you to our presentation. My name is Richard Weir, and thanks for all of you for coming out on this lovely day. And just so you're aware, we always have the best and brightest people who come to see our presentations. So consider yourself amongst that esteemed group. I am the chair of the Grow Your Own program, which is put on by the Texas Master Gardener program in Fort Bend County. It's a 7-class program, and I know most of you were able to get the bookmark, which will let you know what's coming up. The Fort Bend Master Gardeners work very closely with Texas A&M's AgriLife Extension Agency. Jody Taylor, who's walking around and throwing things on your table, is our wonderful county extension agent for horticulture, and Brandy Rader, who's not here at the moment, is our program coordinator, who we could not live without. She really makes so much possible. A couple of quick housekeeping items. Bathrooms are out that door to the right. We ask that you silence your phones and keep any side conversations to a minimum. There will be an opportunity for questions after each presenter finishes their talk. We are videotaping this, as you can see there, and it will be sent out to all the registrants around a week after this presentation's conclusion. It will include all the links that are on the screen, so you don't have to try and squint, see them, and write them all down madly while they're still on the screen before they disappear to the next slide. Today you're in for just an absolute delight. Oh, well, first, I'm sorry. This is my first time, so there you go. You're stuck with that. Our next presentation will be on February 7th. It will be on fruit trees. And that presentation will not be in this building. It will be on the fairgrounds in Building B. The following Saturday is our fruit tree sale, which is why, of course, we're having the fruit tree talk before that. And for the guys in here, roses are nice, but imagine if you brought a fruit tree home for your loved one. They'd really be impressed with you. I don't have the room for them, unfortunately. Our first speaker is Peggy DeHemport. She joined the Fort Bend Master Gardeners in 2003 following her retirement from a career in human resources management. She was certified as advanced trained in earth-kind landscaping. You might need to look that up. In 2015, and enjoys sharing her knowledge with others. She has served as past president of the Fort Bend County Master Gardeners in 2016 and 2017, and has held various other Fort Bend Master Gardener board positions over the years, and is currently the president of the Fort Bend County Agricultural and Horticultural Advisory Committee. She lives in Richmond, where she and her husband landscape with birds and pollinators in mind, and grow vegetables and fruit for their table. Our second presenter, who's going to focus on the soil, which we call instead of dirt, is Dan Lawler. He grew up in Delaware, attending the family's small rose garden, received his bachelor and master's degree in plant science at the University of Delaware, where he met his wife, Patty, who's also a master gardener. He gained his PhD in agronomy from Kansas State University, served as director of soil and forage testing laboratory at Wharton County Junior College, where he also taught classes in agriculture and biology. He has been a Fort Bend County Master Gardener since 2000 and currently chairs our entomology group and enjoys growing roses and plants that support butterflies and other pollinators. These are two absolutely remarkable people, very knowledgeable. I've learned a lot about things over the past, especially bugs. And I think you're in for a real treat today. So without any further ado, Ms. Peggy.
Thank you, Richard. I'm testing this mic. I have it turned up all the way, so I guess it's as far as it goes. It's not too loud, is it? You're good? Okay. Well, welcome everybody. Thanks for being here. Thanks for that nice introduction. And after hearing Dan's credentials, I feel like a kindergartner, but we'll try to make this a great day for you. I'd like to know something about the audience. How many of you here today, show of hands, are thinking about creating your first vegetable garden? Good, good. I'll be talking about planting. How many of you already have a vegetable garden? Great, so we have about a mix of both, and hopefully we'll impart some knowledge to you that all of you can use. I'm sure we will. Okay, here we go. I'll be talking about edible garden planning. The picture you see here is of master gardeners in our vegetable garden, which is right through these doors. You'll get a chance to visit it later today if you'd like to. And this is a typical, many months of the year, this is a typical Wednesday workday. Those vegetables were harvested right here by us, and they're donated to a food bank every week. And so that's one of our key projects. So I hope afterwards you'll go outside and see what's going on out there. All right. So planning, that's the topic today. I have a friend who used to say, Peggy, if you don't know where you're going, don't be surprised when you get there. And so planning is about beginning with the end in mind. And us gardeners frequently do things impulsively, right? We buy this plant or buy that plant, and then we figure out what to do with it later. Well, a little bit of planning goes a long way towards success. And I like to say know before you grow, especially with edible gardens. So planning begins with that end in mind. What's your goal? Why are you thinking about doing this? Do you want fresh fruits and vegetables for your family just to bring to the table and eat? Or are you thinking about maybe preserving, freezing or canning and enjoying those vegetables all year long? It makes a difference as to how much you plant. Maybe you've got children or grandchildren who are spending way too much time on screens, and you want to create a project to get them out of the house and involved in something else. Well, it can be an interesting family project. Maybe you're tired of maintaining your lawn and would like to convert some of it to productive space. I love this picture. That's the kind of backyard I could enjoy if I had a small suburban yard. No grass to grow, a lot of weeding to do and maintaining, no doubt about it, but that's cool. So success depends on having a good plan, which is what we're here to talk about. You've got to choose a location. Not just any location, but as you're going to see, it has to be usable space. I'll talk a bit more about that in a minute. You've got to decide on how big you want that garden to be. If you're working full-time or going to school full-time and the only time you have for gardening is on evenings and weekends, smaller may be better. You've got to decide what to plant. And of course, once you figure out size and what to plant, you've got to figure out how to adequately space the vegetables and locate them inside your garden space. So we'll start with location, site selection. The first bullet point here is to grow things on soil that's loose, rich, level, and well-drained. Well, if you were doing a traditional garden, planting directly in the ground, that loose and rich soil requirement would be more important than if you build a raised bed, as you're going to see in a little bit, and bring soil in on top of your existing soil. But either way, you want your ground to be level, and you want it to be well drained, because you don't want water standing in the places where you're growing vegetables. Generally speaking, vegetables need at least 6 hours of sunlight a day in order to thrive. So you may have a lot of space in your backyard, but you've got to think about shade and sunlight considerations. If you can, put it near a water supply. And that's probably pretty easy in a small yard, but if you've got a large yard or maybe some acreage, you're going to be either piping water out there, putting in an irrigation system, or if you don't have an irrigation system, you're going to be watering those plants practically every day. So if you're dragging water hoses back and forth across the lawn to the garden, it's going to be much more convenient to be close to water. And be sure you can look out a window and see it regularly throughout the day. Out of sight, out of mind is not a good thing where gardening is concerned. I know I can see mine through my kitchen window, and it reminds me, got to get out there, something might need to be tended to or harvested, which, that's a daily activity. And try to keep it as far away as you can from other trees and shrubs that are established in your yard. And I'll share one of my experiences with you in these pictures. This is my smallish raised bed garden. This is a sweet gum tree that's maybe 30 or 40 feet away. And one year I noticed this in the ground, right outside the wood sides of the bed. And we got out there and cut that root, and all of these little fibrous roots came out of the vegetable garden. Trees are going to seek out water and other nutrients, and if you're feeding those vegetables, you're watering them regularly. You can see I don't have a St. Augustine lawn. I don't have a sprinkler system watering the lawn all the time where these tree roots are all over the place. Those tree roots found my vegetable garden. So that's why, if you can, stay away from established trees and shrubs. Now, usable space. You've got to think about your property. Think about how the sun changes position in the sky during seasons of the year. This time of year, the sun is in the southern sky. In the summertime, it's going to be more overhead. Where do those shadows come from? Your fences, your houses, your trees. You've got to be sure you find a spot on your property where you can achieve that 6 hours of sunlight a day to position your vegetable garden. It's not enough to have space. You've got to have usable space. So how large should it be? Well, how much usable space do you have? And if you decide you don't have a lot of usable space, there are some solutions, which I'll talk about in a little bit. But even an apartment dweller can grow some vegetables on a balcony if they have sunlight there. So, from a balcony garden to a large garden in a large backyard, figure it out and determine what's usable. How much time do you have? I already addressed that. Smaller may be better if you're a busy person without a lot of time to tend to a garden. How big's your family? You want to be able to enjoy the fruits and vegetables that you raise. You don't want it to go to waste. And if you have a big family, you'll need a bigger garden. And why are you doing it? Do you want to enjoy fresh vegetables on the table, just enough to satisfy that desire? Or do you want to preserve, freeze, or can? If you want to do the latter, you're going to need a bigger garden. And what do you want to grow? Don't waste space on things that nobody's going to eat. You've got kids and grandkids. Understand what they like, and grow it. Okay, let's talk about garden style. This is what you might think of as a traditional garden style. If you had a lot of land, you might grow right in the ground with rows and furrows, as you see here. And this can be, very productive. I imagine not many people, maybe nobody in this room has that kind of space to grow this way. But the thing about traditional gardening styles is that there's space wasted to some extent between the rows. But I want you to notice something. Even though this garden is in the ground, notice these rows are raised. You're still raising that soil up a little bit to allow for good drainage in heavy rains. So that's how maybe Grandma and Grandpa used to garden. There's a different style of gardening which is called intensive gardening, which is to say create a garden space, and the objective is to grow as much as you can in there, season after season. You don't have much wasted space. It's not as labor intensive as that big traditional garden is with rows and furrows, and it's ideal for a suburban backyard. Now, I asked my master gardener friends to share some pictures with me from their backyards, and I think this is interesting. Here's a backyard garden. It looks like a small suburban backyard, and this master gardener is growing vegetables in the ground, but she's raised the soil up a little bit, like you saw in those rows and furrows. And it looks like she's got some bird netting going on to keep some critters out. And here's another one. This master gardener has a small yard by some comparisons, and she's got things growing in ground, in pots, on trellises, and so you can, figure out your space and how you want to use it, and end up with a different. There's a good bit of variety that can be achieved in how you garden once you evaluate your usable space. Now, this is what most of us think about when we talk about creating a vegetable garden. Commonly, we call these raised beds, but as I pointed out, even in-ground gardens can be raised. And so we'll talk more about that. So if you're going to build a raised bed, like the one you just saw in the last picture, what do you need to think about? Well, you don't want it any wider than 3 to 4 feet. It can be as long as you want, depending on your usable space. But why 3 or 4 feet? That's because you don't want to get in there. You don't want to stand in there. You want to be able to tend to the garden from the outsides. You want it to be 8 to 12 inches deep. That's where the majority of the roots are going to be in the plants that you're going to be planting, your vegetable plants. And you want to be sure you have maneuvering room. If you're mowing the grass around that raised bed garden, be sure the mower and the wheelbarrow and all the things, the tools that you use in the yard can get around that raised bed or 2 raised beds. Yes, ma'am?
I was reclaiming some area that was full of weeds, so I put cardboard on top of it, and I was thinking of doing the raised bed on top of that. Would that be a drainage issue though, if I put the cardboard in?
No, it won't be, and that's a good point. My next slide, the existing vegetation. Thank you for bringing us there. The question was, can you use, okay, you're starting with your raised bed, you've got turf grass, right? So what you have to do is remove that turf grass. You can do that manually if you want to, and then dig out any woody plant roots that are there. And then if you've got perennial weeds in the spot, you can kill them either with a systemic herbicide, or you can solarize it. You can cover that ground with plastic and let it bake in the sun until the weeds are gone. But the suggestion that this lady mentioned has been used. I don't have a picture of it this year. But if you took a big bunch of big cardboard boxes, all your Amazon orders, and you opened them up until they were flat, you could lay those cardboard boxes. Probably you'd want to remove the turf grass if you could, but at any rate, you could lay the cardboard boxes flat over the area that you want to build your raised bed and let the edges stick out a little bit from the sides. And then you could bring in your garden soil mix and put it on top of that cardboard. You'd still have room for the roots of your plants to grow. And over time, as you were watering your plants and And that cardboard's gonna break down, it's gonna decompose, and pretty soon you don't have that cardboard barrier anymore. So that's definitely an option to get your raised bed built. And of course, then you've got to install edging. It can be any edging you want. You can use metal, brick, cinder block, stone, or wood. And then you're going to fill that raised bed with a commercially available compost-enriched garden soil. You can find garden soil mixes in bags at garden centers, or you can call a soil yard and have a volume of it delivered to add to your raised bed. But you want a garden soil mix that has organic matter in it, and that's what the compost is for. And then you fill up your bed and leave about 2 inches so that you can mulch your plants. Mulch has a lot of benefits. It conserves water and it deters weeds, and it keeps the soil cooler than it would otherwise be, which is good for plant health. Roots are happier in the summertime with a little bit cooler soil.
I have a question.
Yes?
So going back to what you mentioned a minute ago about the 8 to 12 inches, and is that plus the 2 inches of the mulch?
No, that's the total. If you build up your raised bed 8 to 12 inches, leave the top 2 inches to put some mulch. Yeah, good.
What about cottonwood compost? Is that pretty good stuff?
Yes. It is. So these are the kinds of things you might plant in a small garden. I bet you can find some things on this list that you like. Of course, they don't all grow. They have a season. Everything has a season, as I'll mention in a minute. But these are all good. But then you got to figure out how many of each plant to plant. This is what happened to me in 2021. That's my tomatoes. I had decided that year I wanted 2 slicing tomatoes and 1 cherry tomato. So I got my tomatoes, and then right after I planted them, I ran into an heirloom tomato, another slicer that I'd grown before, and I just had to have it again, so I bought it. And I had so darn many tomatoes, I was giving them away to anybody I could find, and I learned how to make tomato sauce out of Juliet tomatoes to put in the freezer to use for pasta sauce as the year went by. So this is about planning versus impulsive buying, right? And you're going to figure this out. There's no magic formula. You know, experience is a great teacher with any kind of garden. And of course, if you're going to freeze or can things, you are going to want to grow more than if you're just going to want to eat them. But there's nothing better than homegrown tomatoes, so I wasn't too unhappy with this. We ate tomatoes at three meals every day. Little goes a long way. That was a successful year. Okay, so deciding what you want to plant happens, and then you got to decide, you got to understand the timing of your planting. There are cool season crops and warm season crops. And as you've seen in our Grow Your Own class schedule, we've got classes on both of these coming up. But with cool season crops, those plants want lower soil temperatures. So you want to plant them before the soil warms in the spring, you know, like December, January, or you plant them in the late summer so that you can get a harvest before the first frost. Warm season crops aren't going to tolerate frost, and they're not going to grow when the soil temperatures are cool. So you wait till after the last frost in spring. Tomatoes, right? We try to get them in as early as we can, maybe around March 1, but then if we have a late frost or freeze, we've got to start over sometimes. So timing of planting is important, and this is pretty much taken care, unless you're starting plants from seed yourself. If you're going to a garden center, they're going to be selling you what you should be growing, right? Okay, so here's the list of the cool season and the warm season crops. At least some of the crops. Not every crop there is, but these are some that are commonly grown.
Going back to the warm and the cold, the garden bed that I'm thinking of doing, it's metal, and I understand that metal attracts the heat. So is that going to affect the season, or does that matter? Or should I put an insulation if it's in the warm season, then it might burn up my?
I don't think you need to worry about that.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. So now I'm talking about not the location of your garden on your landscape, but how you position plants in the garden during the seasons. You don't want tall plants or plants on trellises shading other plants. So in the warm season, when the sun is higher in the sky, you would plant your taller plants at the south side of your garden, and in the cool season, you would plant them on the north side. And if you don't have room for a raised bed, you can use containers. This is a really cool container, but I'm not suggesting you put both in the backyard. But here's some examples of the size. You know, as long as you size the container for the plant that you're planting, you'll have some success. And here's some examples of things in the size container that they need. And you can use any well-drained container and have a cute, productive mini garden. The beauty about containers is if you don't have enough sunlight, you can move them in the yard to wherever the sun is if they're small enough to be moved, right? Not both, or not these necessarily. But if you had something like this, or like these. Here's a couple of master gardener pictures. This was used in a greenhouse to grow strawberries, and she inherited it from a relative, and she's got it growing up on cinder blocks. She's not growing in the ground here, you know. She's growing in a container. Now, if you're growing in a container, you don't use garden soil. You don't dig up soil out of your yard or your garden. You use a potting mix. And there's commercially available potting soils. And some of them come with some slow-release fertilizers that will last for a while. But then you've got to keep using slow-release fertilizers if you're growing in containers. Potting soil is not fertile. It's just a good growing medium that gives the roots the air that they need and will retain water, you know, after you water or after it rains sufficiently to grow that plant. You can make your own if you want to, using 1 part of peat moss vermiculite or perlite and 1 part coarse builder's sand. But when you're growing in potting soil, you've always got to use a slow-release fertilizer, and Osmocote is an example of a slow-release fertilizer that you might be familiar with. Potting soil is not fertile. Yes?
Yes, this kind of answered the question I had earlier. The difference between potting and planting soil. I know you said have about 18 inches. So if you have existing soil, but I live in Wallace and that soil is black and clay and gumbo, I guess is what they call it. Could you do the same, like add the vermiculite, perlite to that soil and it still be in the ground as your garden?
There are ways to amend your native soil to make it more conducive to plants, and maybe Dan might touch on that in the soil section. So hold that thought for a little while, yeah. Okay, I want to point out some resources. The Master Gardeners have a website, fbmg.org, and you're going to see some good resources here, and one of them is this vegetable planting guide. For the months of the year, this is designed for Fort Bend County. The green lines tell you when the ideal planting times are for these vegetables, and the red lines tell you that you can still plant them, but it's rather marginal. And you can find this at fbmg.org in the article library tab. There.
Is that planting from starting with seeds, or is that from when they're actually like?
The left-hand column tells you the answer to that question.
Oh, sorry.
If it's for planting plants, you'll see the word plants in parentheses. Otherwise, it's for seeds.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. Okay. Aggie Horticulture is a website maintained by Texas A&M University. It's also got some great resources for vegetable gardening. Each one of these Each one of these is a PDF file on the kind of vegetable that you're wanting to look up, and these are written for homeowners. These are written for us. And a quick word about fruit as part of edible gardening. The differences between vegetable gardening and fruit production I've laid out here. Vegetable production is a short-term endeavor. Fruit production is like a forever endeavor, so to speak, right? Year after year. Vegetables, crops change with the season. Fruit, you get one seasonal crop. You can take a season off with vegetables. You gotta keep paying attention to your fruit trees, right? Vegetables are less susceptible weather, fruit more susceptible. They're both rewarding. And we have a class coming up on fruit production. If you're interested in this, please come. You've got to understand a lot of things with fruit production, and you've got to maintain those fruit trees year-round in the kinds of ways that you see here. And I'm speeding up a little bit because I've been told my time is running short, but I'll be hanging around afterwards if you want to talk about any of this. Fruit site selection, 8 hours a day, sunlight a day. You can't grow fruit trees in low wet spots. And you gotta think about spacing, just like those vegetable plants. These are the recommended spacing between fruit trees. And you're gonna buy a fruit tree that's a little bitty stick in a little bitty pot, and you've gotta imagine, what kind of space it's gonna need as it matures. And some of our small suburban backyards will have some limitations on some of these things. You've not only got your existing trees to think about, but your neighbors as well. And if you don't have enough space, you can consider growing some kinds of fruit trees in a pot. Citrus is a good example. You use a large container, well-draining potting mix, slow-release fertilizer. It's recommended that you kind of thin the fruit not to stress the tree, and then you've got to probably repot it about every 3 or 4 years after you've root pruned it to keep it going. But here's a master gardener friend of mine. She harvested, I think the number is something like 30 Meyer lemons off of that container-grown Meyer lemon tree. Isn't that cool? Now, I've had a Meyer lemon tree in the ground, and I had over 100 lemons. And somebody tell me later, what you do with 100 lemons? So I think there can be a lot to be said for container gardening of citrus. Yeah, a lot of money if you want to set up on the street corner and sell them, right?
I got one this year, it's like this big, but my trees bloomed again, and now it's got a bunch of new ones. The weather being so changeable, it's just gone.
Oh, the weather's
so
crazy.
confused.
Look at these cool season vegetable crops that we're growing at 85 degrees.
Yeah.
Okay, online resources for home fruit production. Again, at Aggie Horticulture, there are many fun fact sheets. And our class schedule, which you've already got in front of you, I hope. Notice what's coming up on all these topics. And our 41st annual Fort Bend Regional Vegetable Conference. This is coming up. It's going to be at the Epicenter. And for the first time ever, there is a special track. It's hard for you to read, I know. But there is a special track in this for backyard and master gardeners that talks about vegetable gardening. It's inexpensive. It's all day. You get a lunch. So think about coming to that. And here's a QR code if you want to grab it real quick. You can find it on our website.
I got a question here.
Yeah, sorry?
Yeah, on the fruit trees that you were talking about, the spacing, especially for fig trees, we're doing espaliering along the side of the fence. So does that spacing change if we do espaliering on figs?
It sure does. It changes. You're going to be able to grow more in less space. And we have some examples of espaliered trees out here in the fruit garden next to the vegetable garden. So yeah, come on out. You're going to need space in one direction, but not all directions, right? I'm sorry, I can't tell where the question came from. Right there. Thank you. Okay. All right. You've heard about our fruit tree sale. In March, we'll have a spring vegetable and herb plant sale here. March 7th, right in this very room. And then do it. grow something is so much fun. You never know when you're gonna have a cauliflower like that. All right, that's it for me.
Is it working yet? Good. I'm gonna shuffle a couple things over here so I don't have to keep it going back and forth. Okay, so let's see. My background is in agronomy. Does anybody know what agronomy is? It's the study of crops and soils. So crops like field crops, cotton, rice, sorghum, so on. But basically it's growing plants and looking at the soil.
How do you spell that?
AGRONOMY. Agronomy. Okay, so Peggy mentioned a couple things about soil, and since we're growing our plants in them, we would like to have good fertile soil. So I'm going to talk about several things. What is soil? Some of the physical characteristics of soil. How we can improve soil structure. Look at soil water and the importance of soil water. Plant nutrients, because our plants have to feed. They get all their basically all their nutrients from the soil. Talk a little about fertilizers and soil testing. How many people have done a soil test before? Good for you. Okay, so by volume, soil is about 50% what we call pore space and 50% solids. So the pore space is where the water or the air is. Okay, so if you haven't been watering your lawn at all, right now there's probably more air than water in that pore space. The solid portion of the soil, and again about 50%, is the minerals, the soil particles we'll talk about in a bit, and organic matter. In a good fertile soil, you can have up to 5 or 6% organic matter or more. But in Texas, we're lucky to have about 3% because with the warm weather, the organisms, the microorganisms in the soil feed on that organic matter so it doesn't get to accumulate as much. Okay, so the lay of the land, elevation. So around here it's not very hilly, except in a few areas, but in general, if you look at Texas, we're here on the Gulf Coast where it's a lower elevation, and it gets, elevation continues up as you go west, northwest in Texas. Rainfall is important because that's where we get our water. In Texas, annual rainfall increases as you go from the west toward the east. And here in Fort Bend County, we average about 45 inches a year. And we know, let's see, did we get 45 inches last year? No. So again, it's averaged over a long period of time. So we may get 60 inches one year and 30 something another year.
Sometimes you get 45 inches in a day.
And sometimes you get 10 inches in a day. Okay, parent material. Okay, so parent material is basically the bedrock what was in an area originally that the soil then, as the parent material weathered and broke down, the soil forms on top of it. So if you dug down deep enough, in most areas, you would get to the bedrock. In a lot of our soils in our area are what are known as alluvial soils, and that just means that the parent material that our soil is developed from was deposited by water. So from rivers flooding onto areas and so on. Okay, so physical characteristics of the soil, what we see and feel of the soil. First of all, color. Soils can be all different colors, by the way. Some real pretty ones too. But basically, in the top, as Peggy mentioned, 6 to 10 or 12 inches is where the darker soil is going to be. That's because that's where most of the organic matter is. As microorganisms break down that organic matter, that's what gives it that dark color. That's also where most of the roots of the plants are going to be, and where most of because that's where the roots are, that's where most of the organic matter is going to be. Now, that said, note that there are roots that go down farther than that. And especially like if you have a tree or a plant with a tap root, one main root that goes way down like a pecan tree and some other trees, that can go down deep into the soil. Okay, soil texture. Soil texture is the percentage of sand-sized particles, silt-sized particles, and clay. So it's made up 3 main particles, sand, silt, and clay. So sand, you've all been to the beach, right? So sand is what makes the soil feel gritty. Okay, that's the largest size particle. 2 millimeters is, let's see, a dime is about 1 1/3 millimeters thick, and 2 millimeters is less than 1/10 of an inch, so not real big. But again, sand gives it a gritty feel. Silt-sized particles are smaller than that, actually much smaller, and those particles give soil, they make it feel like flour, right? So if you ever be bakers, feel like flour. And clay is what makes the soil feel sticky when it's wet, and clay is what gets stuck on your hand mostly. Okay, so the way you read this, it's so much fun. So here's the percentage of clay going from 0 up to 100. So right here is 50% clay, and in our area, this star represents kind of an average type soil in this area. And so this side is the percent of silt. And so if we go down here, that's about 15% silt. And this is the percentage sand. And if we go up this way, this is about 35% sand. So that's how you read that. Okay, an ideal soil would basically an ideal soil would have about equal characteristics of sand, silt, and clay, and it would fall somewhere in this area, and so that's what that star represents. Okay, so sand, silt, and clay particles. If we think about them relative size, then so here's a sand-sized particle. So relatively, a sand particle would be the size of a basketball. Sorry, I didn't bring a basketball, but it's about that big. A silt-sized particle would be the size of a kernel of corn. So we've all seen ear of corn, 1 kernel of corn, and a clay-sized particle would be a pinpoint. Okay, so think about when you stack basketballs together, lots of space in between, right? When you throw kernels of corn in an area, the spaces are smaller in between, right? And certainly when you put pinpoints, the spaces between those pinpoints are really small, right? So sandy soils have lots of pore space, and so the water's going to drain nice and easy through a sandy soil. Clay soils have tiny spaces, and so water's going to move really slow through them. So that's why if you have a clay soil, like my yard, when you water, if you have a sprinkler system, or even if you just put a hose end sprayer out or whatever, only water for about 10 minutes. Then let it soak in for a half hour or so, and water for about 10 minutes more. The reason is, in 10 minutes, it's going to be puddled, right? And then it's going to start to run off. It's not going to go in fast enough on a clay soil. So you water some, let it soak in, water a little more, and it will soak in. Okay, in Fort Bend County, we have about 10% light colored sandy soils, about 31% dark clay soils. Basically what a lot of the soils in our area are. It's called the Lake Charles Bernard Association. Somebody mentioned gumbo, close enough. And then there's some mixed sandy and clay soils and soils of floodplains, those alluvial soils. You can check out online, there's a soil survey, Fort Bend County. Technology today, they're online now. This is one I have that's a paper copy from Delaware. Where's Delaware? Well, that's where I grew up. But anyway, this is a paper copy, and it's pretty cool because you can go to different areas of the state or county, depending, and find out what your soils are. That said, that shows you the soil that was there. How many people live in a neighborhood? Okay, our soils are going to be a little different. Why? The builders brought in stuff, they leveled it out and all that stuff. But anyway, so you can check it out online, see what the natural soil is in your area. Again, it's better if you're on some land, if you have property with some land, that's a good way to see what your soil types are. Although, if you've been there for a while, you probably kind of know the soils. Okay, soil improvement. Okay, probably the best way to improve soil is by adding organic matter. Compost, grass clippings, leaves, the whole bit. It helps improve water retention because that organic matter helps hold soil particles together that otherwise would be apart, and that helps with water movement through the soil. Helps with fertility. It decreases pest and disease pressure. Basically, a healthy soil gives you a healthy plant, and a healthy plant is better able to fight off diseases. Sick plants actually give off a signal that attracts pests. Honest. Okay, and so anyway, it's much easier to adjust a soil's fertility, how much nutrients are in it, and so on, than the physical property. So to answer your question, can you add lots of vermiculite and everything to a clay soil and make it better? It's a lot easier to add compost to help improve that. Because the amount of sand and silt that you would have to add to a soil that's high in clay would be cost prohibitive. Okay, structure. So in a good soil, we don't want just individual soil particles, sand, silt, and clay. So what happens is typically they aggregate or connect with each other in some ways. So again, soil is produced, and for a typical soil to be produced, for 1 inch of soil to be produced, it typically takes about 10,000 years from parent material. Now, that said, they've done studies where, for example, a castle is abandoned, and what are castles made out of? Limestone, stones. Okay, so those start to weather, and soil forms quicker than 10,000 years in that particular area. But it takes a long time for soil to form, so we should take care of it. So structure. So they can be various shapes, sizes, typically anything from about a match head to a large pea size. And the best way to improve soil structure, again, is to add organic matter. Okay, so here we have good soil structure. So we have on the surface soil, good loose soil and crumbs. Compacted or a poor soil. We have these compacted layers, and so there's not as much pore space. The soil's been compressed, and that's not good for root growth. Yes.
So I'm in a new neighborhood where the builders took our soil down to clay, and then they just laid the fresh sod on top of it. So would humic acid treatment be good for helping to break up the clay and let the soil get healthier?
Humic acid, so basically humic acid is a result of organic matter breaking down. And so basically instead of adding organic matter, you're adding the humic acid. So it could help, but organic matter would probably do the same thing. Compost, it just may take a little longer. Yes, ma'am.
So, I do not know what sod is.
It's grass. It's just where they lay the grass down.
Yeah, sod is the couple-inch thick layer on the surface where the grass is.
Maybe that's why they removed it all, like when they're building a new neighborhood.
Yeah, typically in a neighborhood, they'll bring in soil and level the area, and then of course they dig out the streets and all that, and then they will hopefully grade it somewhat so that it goes down from the house to between the houses to allow for drainage. But that soil that they bring in can be pretty much from anywhere. Yes?
What is your opinion of expanded shale?
Pardon? Expanded shale. Can you use expanded shale? Yes. Expanded shale is something that's come about in the last 10 or 15 years, and some people really like it. Yeah.
You do use it, you recommend it?
I don't use it myself, but it seems to work pretty well for some people.
I have another question concerning how to acidify soil. I've sent test soil to be tested at A&M several times. It's always too basic. it's already high in sulfur. Been fighting it for several years.
We're gonna get to soil testing in a bit, if we can hang on a minute. Okay, so, good soil structure, again, that'll help with drainage. This water will drain faster. It will help with aeration, because roots breathe just like we do. They need air as well as water. Okay, drainage. So I mentioned with a clay soil, don't water more than about 10 minutes. And this is the reason, because if we were to just put a bottle of water with a hole in the bottom and set it on our soil and look at how fast it goes down through the soil. If we had a sandy soil, large pores, it goes down pretty quick, and it doesn't go side to side very much. It pretty much just goes down. A clay soil, on the other hand, again, it will kind of pond and go in rather slowly, and it'll spread out horizontally better than in the sandy soils. So again, all that means is if you have a sandy soil, you'll be watering a little bit more often and doing it more often, because it will tend to drain. For a clay soil, you'll want to water, again, for a little bit, let it soak in, do it a little bit more.
And this is just for in-ground gardening. We're not talking about pots, because we would put it
Yes,
straight in the pot.
right now we're talking about the soil in the ground. Okay, organic matter, as I mentioned, in the top 6 to 12 inches is where most of the roots and the microbes are going to be. It's good to have lots of organic matter. The bad thing about organic matter is when we disturb the soil, if we plow it, that exposes it to air, and the microorganisms then can break down that organic matter. They tend to break it down faster when it's well aerated. Okay, organic matter. It loosens soil, but it helps aggregate soil. And you look at those and you say, wait, that's two different things, and it's doing both. Okay, so it loosens a soil that is tight, like a clay soil. And it helps aggregate soils that are not well aggregated. So soils that are aggregated will have better water movement and all than soils that are not. Organic matter provides nutrients both for the plants and for the soil microbes, increases aeration, water movement, buffers the soil pH. That just means that it keeps the pH of the soil from going way up or way down. Helps regulate temperature, and it prevents erosion, because those aggregates aren't individual soil particles. It's easier for individual soil particles to be eroded than to erode those aggregates. Okay, so what's the difference between organic matter and humus? And yes, that's humus, not hummus. So organic matter is everything that was once alive. Okay? And that's before it becomes humus. What's going to happen with the organic matter is the microbes and worms love it. It's going to provide food for them. Those microbes, as they feed on that organic matter, they're going to break it down, and the nutrients that are tied up in that organic matter are going to be released back into the soil. And then they're going to be available to the plants. Humus is what's left after the organic matter has been decomposed. Okay, so that's where humic acid would be from. It's kind of a magic thing because it coats the soil particles and it helps them aggregate and also gives them their dark color. So, how is humus made? Well, all of the microorganisms in the soil, the bacteria, the fungi, the protozoa, all those guys are feeding on it. In addition, macroorganisms are feeding on it. The earthworms and earthworm castings are an excellent fertilizer. A little pricey, maybe, but sow or pill bugs, snails, earwigs, and other insects, and so on. They're all feeding on that organic matter. Okay, fertilizers. How many people have fertilizers? Yeah, sure. Okay, so does everybody know what these three numbers mean? Okay, it's the percentage. The first one is the percentage nitrogen. Second is the percentage phosphorus, P. And the third is percent potassium, K. Okay, so the reason it's like that is because back in the day, farmers thought they were getting cheated. They thought the fertilizers they were buying didn't have what the sellers were saying was in it. And so now it's law that that fertilizer has to have at least that much NP and K in it, or you get in big trouble. Okay, so this says 50% organic. Let's see. Math is a 4-letter word. You can do that when you look back at it. Basically, it says 3% is water insoluble, so that's basically slow release. So 3.6% of 12% is 0.3 or 30%. So 30% is insoluble. Water insoluble, so that's slow release, if you will. The other 70% is readily available. So that means whenever water contacts it, it's going to become soluble and be released in the soil. Okay, a lot of different organic fertilizers. Here's some, just for example, with nitrogen. So again, these are the fertilizer grades of these different organic materials. Let's go back 1 second. Okay, a little math. 12 plus 8 is 20, plus 4 is 24. So that's 24% fertilizer. And you go, wait a minute, I'm getting ripped off. What's the other 76%? Well, that is what's known as filler and some other materials, but basically, there's a limit to how much of each nutrient can be put into a given fertilizer. And we'll see that as we look at this next slide, because synthetic forms of chemical forms of fertilizers, urea has the highest content of nitrogen, and it's only 46%. It's not 100% nitrogen, right? So if you're mixing up a batch of fertilizer and you use urea, if you just have urea, the most nitrogen you're going to have is 46%. If you make a mix with that, it's going to be less than that. So you're not really getting ripped off. Anyway, so a lot of different organic fertilizers. Again, organic means they're going to be released slowly as the microbes feed on them and break them down. Okay, so slow release versus fast relief fertilizer. Fast relief just means that when they get wet, when it rains, that those nutrients are going to be available right away. Slow release means they're going to be released a little bit at a time as as the material breaks down. So organic fertilizers are slow release because it's going to take a while for the microorganisms to break it down. Also, anybody ever heard of Osmocote? Okay, so one way that they make slow release fertilizers is they coat the material, and that way when that coating gets wet, only a little bit of the fertilizer that is in there is released at a time. So you have slow release. Okay, what is pH? And what does it matter? So pH is the potential of the hydrogen ion, H plus or the proton. Basically, it's a measure of how acidic or how basic a solution is. The range is from 0, very acidic, to 14, very basic, and 7 is neutral. Okay, so here is a lot of stuff. You can also look at this at epa.gov. And there's lots of other materials of different pHs, but basically it's going to go from extremely acid, battery acid, all the way up to extremely basic, where you have liquid drain cleaner. That's why you use gloves when you're doing that, right? And so on, and everything in between. Pure water is pH of 7. And I'll let you look at some of those later. Okay, for soils, what pH means is, so this shows the pH of soil, and for each of these nutrients, so nitrogen and so on, the width of the band is how available they are at that pH. So at pH of between 6 and 8, nitrogen is very available, but at very low or very high pH, it's not very available to the plant.
So you can put nitrogen on it all day, but if your pH is off.
Exactly. So, right. So what this means is if your pH is really low, you can put nitrogen on as much as you want, but it's not going to be doing its job because the pH is off. So if we look at all of these in general, the widest band of each occurs in a pH between 6 and 7. So that's what we refer to for plants as our ideal pH, because that's when most of those nutrients are going to be available to the plant. Okay, and that too. Okay, so for plants, there are 16 essential elements, and here they are. Carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen comes from air, carbon dioxide, and water, H2O. The others, all the others, and we're missing molybdenum, my favorite down there, and also some also require nickel and cobalt, but they haven't added them to the list yet. The rest of these have to come from the soil. Plants can't get them any other way. Okay, so how do you remember them? Well, if you think of the order, this is the same order they were in on the previous slide, and you just say the little ditty. It's C. Hopkins Cafe, managed by my good, close cousin, Mo. C. Hopkins Cafe. There you go. And there'll be a quiz on that later. Okay, soil sampling. Good idea. If you haven't done it yet, you probably should. So, there are forms, and you can go to this website. I've got a list of websites at the end. You can get a soil sample bag from the extension office. This is what the forms look like, and I'll pass these around, and there's more how to do it on the back. You can also, again, you can also get these at the extension office.
But you
What-
wouldn't do this for like a container that you're putting.
Yeah, this is for your in-ground soil, yeah.
Okay, just check.
You probably don't really need to test your potting soil. They should be fine.
I tested my raised garden because I bought the soil from a dirt yard. It's supposed to be organic, but things were not growing yet. So I actually sent a test off to them. Didn't have any nitrogen.
Okay, so potting soil at a testing lab has to be a little different than soil.
Right.
Okay, so you're gonna need a bucket. I'll do this real quick. A spade. You can also use a probe, also available from the extension office. You can borrow it. This is handy. You just go around to several different places, put it in. You're going to want to go about 6 inches to about there, and take it. You can push it out. If you have a dowel, you can use that. Push it out. Put it in a bucket. Go to 6, 8, 10 areas and get a sample. Put it in the bucket. Mix it up. You want to take out, any grass or rocks that might have gotten in there. And then you're going to send about a coffee cup full. And I think they have a line on the bag that you fill up to here. So basically about a coffee cup full is what you're going to send into the lab. So they're only as good as the samples you take. So, don't take 6 samples from one spot. Take it, make it representative of the area that you want to test. So, if the area you're going to test is as big as this room, you may want to take a few extra. Again, get them all in the bucket, mix it up real well, and you're still only going to send a coffee cup full. Okay, so this is what the form looks like. The one you're looking at is a new one. I left this one on because this portion is now on the back page. And that is where you put in what you're going to be growing. Okay, so in this case, common Bermuda grass was selected. You want to put, are you going to grow roses or a vegetable garden, trees, whatever. And that's because different plants require different amounts of fertilizer. Okay, you're not going to put the same amount of fertilizer on snow peas that you are on tomatoes and so on. Okay, so things you want to remember: name, address, your email. They now charge $3 to mail the results, so you can get it emailed for free. You also want to indicate where the sample is. So if it's if you have several beds that you're going to be testing, you need to label them so you'll remember which one's which. How big the area is and what you're going to be growing, and then which test you want. And the tests are down here. And typically you're going to want the basic test, and maybe plus micronutrients, which is one. It's like 1 or 2, number 1 or 2. Okay, so we're done. I was going to take you through an example of Master Gardener's journey over several years of having his soil tested and seeing what's in it, and then doing some things. And long story short, he was going to make Bermuda grass lawn into a vegetable garden. pH was 7.5, maybe a little high, but not too drastic. Phosphorus Okay, so I'm gonna go to this one because we can see it better. This is the newer printout. So this is all the nutrients that were tested. This CL is the critical level. And the critical level is different for each nutrient. The critical level is just basically if you have that much in your soil, it doesn't pay to add any more. It really won't do any good to add more. So here's the critical level on the bar chart. And so you can see some were a little above. And actually, in this case, phosphorus was way above. And that's because he had his, so if I remember this right, his son had a school project and was raising chickens in their garage. And he was putting the chicken manure out as fertilizer. Well, that's good, manure. But chicken manure happens to be very high in phosphorus. And so his phosphorus, that's why his phosphorus levels went nuts. It's also high in salts, which is not real good for soils. Okay, so let's see, some references. And here's the websites that will be available when you guys get it, where you can take a quick shot now, and then we'll go to the next slide and be ready for any more questions you may have.
So just to let everyone know, all of those links are going to be provided to you in an email along with a YouTube video of this presentation. So you'll get all of the links.
Any other questions? Darn, I was going to say I did an excellent job then. Yes, sir.
Our compost pile has become one large fire ant bed. So how do we rid ourselves of those before we use compost? I think they're doing a great job of breaking down the thing.
Jody, any ideas?
You could put some ant bait in there. It's just going to target the ant colony. It's not going to hurt the other microbes. I wouldn't use an ant poison like triazine or anything because that can kill other insects you don't want to kill. But like Android ant bait, it's going to target the ants.
How do you apply it? I mean, our compost is enclosed, you just put the, just sprinkle the.
Yeah, just sprinkle on the top.
Top?
Yeah, they're attracted to it. They'll come up and take it down to the colony.
Yeah, a lot of times what I do with fire and hills, or with compost, if you just put like a teaspoonful in several spots around, they'll find it.
One thing that I found very simple, if you've got ants in your garden and you want them to move so you can poison them somewhere else, just take a long strong stick and decimate the mound and they'll move 100% of the time.
Yeah, so one of the things that at a seminar on fire ants, they are the best scavengers of any ants that are going to be in our area. And obviously they're imported, right? So they're not native ants. So to target them, you target them with baits because they will take the bait faster and better than any of the other ants out there. So baits work really well, and they will go find the bait. They'll go to the ant HEB, if you will, and basically take the bait and take it back. So you don't necessarily have to put it in your compost pile all the time. You can put it in areas. It's just the baits, the way it was explained to me is that with ant baits, if they get wet, it's like soggy potato chips, and ants don't like those any better than we do. So they really target the oils in the bait, so you have to make sure that it's dry when you apply those.
I have a question about compost and humus. So does compost become humus?
Yes.
Okay, so if you are composting, then, well, let me ask another question. So which one is better for the lawn? Because I'm not clear. I want to start fertilizing my yard. So which one is better, the compost or the humus?
Yes.
Both. Okay.
I mean, if you put compost on, it's going to break down to humus. If you put the humus on, you're just skipping that step.
Oh, okay, it's gonna break down. Okay, so it's not.
So it's a matter of, and I've not looked at the price of humic acid materials, but something tells me compost is more cost effective, but I'm not sure. Yes, ma'am.
Back to my previous question, I have sent in my soil sample several times to Texas A&M, and I followed up with whatever Southwest Fertilizer told me to do to bring down the pH. I've brought it down to 8.2. It's still too basic. Do you have any recommendations that I might not have tried to bring down the pH?
What have you been doing to bring down pH?
Tried adding sulfur. Our sulfur level is already high. They told me that it's just not available in the soil. So we have done everything from microlife products to Medina Has to Grow soil activator. I think that helped a little bit. I'm not sure. We have tried.
Okay, so
we've tried
one of the things.
We have tried.
Okay, so this is your in-ground soil.
Yes,
Okay.
and that's the whole entire, it's about an acre. But whether it's in my rose beds, my lawn, my vegetable, my fruit tree area, it's all basic. The lawn is the worst. That's the one that's 8.2. My hydrangea beds, my rose beds, they're all not acidic enough. Whether it's my shade garden, everything is just basics. The lawn is the worst, which is the 8.2. The others are in the 7.8 range. I do compost. I have my own.
Let's see.
compost
So,
pile.
one of the things is to plant plants that will do well at that pH. That probably doesn't help because you don't want to grow them.
Grass.
And an acre is that's too much for a bunch of raised beds. I don't know, the way I know to bring the pH down is with sulfur, but even with sulfur you can't bring it down that much.
Agricultural lime would probably be the most effective, especially on that size. Oh, yes.
Yeah, lime
Right,
would
so
raise
yes,
the pH.
Yeah, that's even more of a challenge than bringing it down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's okay, the sulfur is high, so just it's okay to keep adding more sulfur?
Well,
Not too much, yeah.
create another problem.
Yeah, so you gosh,
I mean, I'm testing, but they're not telling me what to do about it.
Did you ask A&M?
Like iron, it's not available to the plant. I mean, you can dump a lot of iron on it, but as you showed in your slide, which was excellent, it's not available.
Right.
It's there, but it's not available because you can't pick it up.
right. And then another problem is that, like the slide I showed, when you have too much phosphorus, sometimes too much phosphorus ties up other nutrients as well. So by trying to fix one problem, you may be creating some others, and which one or ones are worse. Well, let me talk with you later, and there might be something. Yes, ma'am.
Have you ever heard of using Epsom salts as an additive to the garden? And what does that do?
Epsom salts. Everybody familiar with Epsom salts? Magnesium sulfate. Okay. So I use them on my roses. On roses they promote the production of new canes from on hybrid teas anyway. They promote new canes. Basically, if your soil is low in magnesium and/or sulfur, that would be a good choice. Yes, ma'am. In the
This
back.
is regarding the acidic basic. My yard has a lot of oak trees, and so I'm usually on the acidic side of things. I don't know, does adding oak to her situation help with that, or does it do something different?
I don't think adding oak leaves would help that much. They also say pine needles help make it a little more acid, but again, it's not going to change that much.
It take a long time.
Yeah.
While adding this organic material, are you saying till or no till? I heard you earlier talking about the structure of the soil, and you said once it's tilled, I think it opens up air pockets.
Okay, what I usually do is, so for example, in my rose beds, in the spring, when I fertilize, and fortunately they're not real big beds, but I usually pull the mulch off and then fertilize, and that's when I would put compost on. Okay, and I don't necessarily work it in, but you could, in the top inch or two. But then, see, I put the mulch back on, and then I refresh the mulch. So there's a couple, 3 inches of mulch on top. And so the microbes in the soil and the macroorganisms, like worms and all, they're going to be working on that compost as well. Yes, ma'am.
How often do you do that? Like twice a year when you're mulching?
If that one I usually only do in the spring, I probably should do it again.
But adding
Second time.
the acid and the
Yes, you can.
once or twice a year.
You can add compost a couple times a year.
Okay. Along those lines, I live in Pecan Grove where we have a lot of squirrels, and I cannot keep them off of my blueberry plant and all that stuff. Do you have any suggestions?
I don't. Someone else.
You figured it out.
might, but
Get a dog.
Get a dog.
That works.
I have a question. We talk about mulch and I know what mulch is, but between a vegetable garden and the yard, what's the best mulch to use for either one?
The best is whatever you have. So so I use a mulching lawnmower, so I don't have grass clippings. But if you have grass clippings, that's a good mulch. If you have pine trees, pine needles. Some people prefer like a Texas native mulch. I myself use what's called pine bark nuggets. And I prefer that over the mulch because I find that the fine mulch kind of, when it gets wet, it kind of forms a mat. And so it seems like when it rains, then it just runs off. Also, it tends to break down a little faster. The nuggets, they're usually pieces anywhere from a quarter to larger. And so they don't break down as fast. They also don't mat like that. But that's what I kind of use.
What about cedar mulch?
Cedar mulch is handy too. It's also a finer one. And I actually use it in one area of my garden as well.
I have a question about water. I have a rain barrel. Is it good to water with that when you're doing your vegetable garden, or does it need pure? referenced earlier?
No, rainwater is good, and it's probably about the best you can do because any water, especially if you're in a neighborhood, the water from your hose has been treated, chlorinated, whatever. Rainwater is about as pure as it's going to get, minus whatever's on your roof at the time. But don't drink it. But definitely water
But like
stuff
when
with
it
it.
sits there and it used.
No, it's fine.
Okay.
Should be fine.
Okay.
Also, rainwater actually has some nitrogen in it too, although that may break down over time. Yes, ma'am.
Bring back the water question, so we have a water filtration system. So I was told to turn it off and then water my garden, but would it matter if I had my water filtration system on and watered my garden like that?
So the water filtration systems, as I understand it, basically they're removing stuff and putting salts in. So the treated water then tends to be salty, a little salty. My humble opinion.
Okay, next question, because I do have 2 raised beds, and something grows, it just dies. I can't keep anything alive when I'm here. But mulch, I never did mulch. So should I wait for, if I plant something and it starts to grow, should I mulch?
Well, what you can do is put your mulch down and leave a little area where it's going to be growing up from.
Got it. Okay.
And that way you're protecting the soil around it and also helping retain moisture.
Two things. If you all would go on to the QR code there and just let us know how we're doing with the presentations today so that we can get your feedback and continue to improve the classes. And also we want to be able to be around for additional questions, but we might want to go ahead and stop in here to the QR code, and then for those who would like to go out to the garden, you're welcome to do that. And